The biggest mistake a person can make is deciding who someone is before learning their name. The sun had barely risen over the city when the glass walls of the Metro Police headquarters caught the first streaks of orange light. Officers moved in and out of the building carrying coffee cups, clipped conversations, and the usual confidence that came with routine. It looked like any other morning, but beneath the surface, something important was about to happen. A new director was arriving. Very few people knew what he looked like. Fewer still knew the reason he had been selected. Inside the department, rumors had been spreading for weeks. Some said the new leader had cleaned up corruption in 2 major cities. Others claimed he had a reputation for holding everyone accountable, regardless of rank. Officer Ryan Walker dismissed all of it. Standing near the front entrance with his hands resting on his duty belt, he watched people come and go with the certainty of a man who believed he understood exactly how the world worked. Ryan had spent nearly 15 years in uniform. He knew every hallway, every supervisor, every unwritten rule. At least, he thought he did. Across the parking lot, a dark sedan rolled slowly into a visitor space. The driver stepped out carrying a simple leather folder. He was a black man in his early 40s wearing a charcoal gray suit that looked professional but unremarkable. No expensive watch. No security detail. No display of status. Just quiet confidence. His name was Marcus Bennett, though nobody nearby seemed to recognize him. Marcus paused for a moment and looked up at the building. His expression was calm, thoughtful, almost reflective. It was as if he were studying more than the structure itself. He appeared to be observing the people inside it. The habits. The attitudes. The culture. As Marcus walked toward the entrance, several employees passed him without a second glance. To them, he was just another visitor. Ryan noticed him immediately. Something about Marcus's presence seemed to irritate him. Maybe it was the confidence. Maybe it was the fact that Marcus showed no sign of being impressed by the badge, the building, or the authority surrounding him. Ryan stepped forward and blocked the doorway. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone carrying less courtesy than the word suggested. Marcus stopped. "Good morning," he replied calmly. "I'm here for a meeting." Ryan looked him up and down. "A meeting?" he repeated with a faint smirk. Around them, a few people slowed their pace, sensing tension in the air. Marcus remained composed. "That's right." Ryan folded his arms. "You got identification?" Marcus reached toward his jacket pocket. Before he could finish, Ryan interrupted him, speaking louder now, making sure nearby people could hear. The atmosphere shifted. Conversations faded. Eyes turned toward the entrance. Marcus never raised his voice. He never appeared angry. Instead, he simply met Ryan's stare with an expression that was impossible to read. And in that moment, while everyone else focused on what was happening in front of them, nobody realized they were witnessing the first few seconds of a lesson that would change the entire department before the day was over. Marcus slowly removed a leather wallet from inside his jacket and held it calmly in front of him, but Ryan did not even glance at it. The officer seemed more interested in asserting control than learning who stood before him. Around them, the steady flow of employees entering the building had begun to slow. A few people exchanged uneasy looks. Others pretended not to notice while quietly listening from a distance. The morning air felt heavier now, charged with the kind of tension that makes ordinary moments feel important. Marcus remained patient. Years of experience had taught him that people often revealed their true character when they believed no one important was watching. Ryan took a step closer and pointed toward the visitor entrance. "You can wait over there until someone confirms whatever meeting you think you have." His voice carried across the front plaza. Several officers near the security desk glanced toward the scene. Marcus lowered the wallet without argument. "I understand," he said. His composure only seemed to frustrate Ryan further. Most people would have become defensive by now. Most people would have demanded respect. Marcus did neither. Instead, he simply observed. His eyes moved briefly across the building entrance, the security procedures, the interactions between employees, and the subtle reactions of those watching. It was almost as if he were taking notes without writing anything down. From inside the lobby, a young administrative assistant named Emily Parker froze when she caught sight of him through the glass doors. Her eyes widened instantly. She had seen his photograph only once during a confidential briefing the previous week. The image had stayed in her memory because everyone had been told that his arrival would mark the beginning of major changes throughout the department. Emily looked from Marcus to Ryan and felt her stomach tighten. She knew exactly who was standing outside. She also knew interrupting a uniformed officer in front of everyone could create a scene. For several seconds she stood completely still, unsure what to do. Outside, Ryan continued speaking. You know, people would save themselves a lot of trouble if they followed instructions the first time. Marcus nodded slightly. That is usually true. The answer sounded simple, yet something about it made Ryan pause. There was no fear in Marcus's voice. No irritation. No attempt to impress anyone. Just quiet certainty. The kind that came from someone who did not need approval from the people around him. A cold breeze swept through the plaza, rustling a nearby American flag mounted above the entrance. The sound of traffic echoed from a few blocks away. Somewhere inside the building, a public address announcement reminded employees that a department-wide meeting would begin in less than 30 minutes. Ryan smirked when he heard it. Big day today, he said. The new director is finally showing up. Marcus glanced toward the building. I have heard that. Ryan laughed softly. Whoever gets the job better be ready. This place does not change for anybody. For the first time, Marcus allowed a faint smile to appear. It lasted only a second before disappearing. Then he looked directly at Ryan and spoke in a calm voice that almost nobody else could hear. Sometimes change arrives before people realize it is already here. Ryan frowned slightly, unsure whether Marcus had intended that statement as a warning or simply an observation. Before he could respond, the sound of the lobby doors opening drew everyone's attention. Emily Parker stepped outside carrying a tablet against her chest. Her heartbeat felt louder with every step. She had spent the last several minutes debating whether to say something, but the longer she watched the scene unfold, the more uncomfortable she became. Marcus noticed her immediately, though he gave no sign of recognition. Emily slowed as she approached the entrance. Ryan glanced toward her. Everything all right? He asked. Yes, she replied quickly, though her voice lacked confidence. She looked at Marcus for a brief second before looking away. Something about the exchange caught Marcus's attention. Emily clearly knew something she was afraid to say. Ryan, however, remained oblivious. He checked his watch and shook his head. The entire department is preparing for this meeting and I am stuck out here dealing with confusion. Marcus folded his hands calmly in front of him. Important days often reveal important things. Ryan let out a short laugh. You talk like a motivational speaker. Several nearby officers chuckled politely. Marcus smiled faintly but offered no reply. Inside the building, employees continued moving through the hallways. The atmosphere felt different now. Anticipation hung in the air. The arrival of the new director had become the only topic anyone wanted to discuss. Rumors traveled from office to office. Some claimed the incoming leader had shut down corruption investigations involving powerful people. Others said he was known for making unexpected inspections without announcing himself. Nobody seemed to know what was true. In a second-floor conference room, command staff members reviewed schedules and presentation materials. Downstairs, officers adjusted uniforms and prepared for the department-wide gathering. Yet outside the front entrance, the most important person connected to the meeting stood quietly beside a row of concrete planters while almost nobody recognized him. Marcus glanced across the parking lot. His eyes settled briefly on a patrol vehicle parked near the curb. Then he looked back toward the building. Every detail appeared to matter to him. Every interaction. Every expression. Every decision. It was the behavior of someone collecting information rather than seeking attention. Ryan eventually gestured toward a nearby bench. "Why do not you wait over there until somebody confirms who you are?" Marcus nodded respectfully. "If that is what you prefer." The answer irritated Ryan more than open disagreement would have. There was something unsettling about a person who refused to be provoked. Marcus walked toward the bench and sat down. The morning sunlight reflected from the headquarters windows, casting bright patterns across the pavement. For a moment everything seemed calm again. Then Marcus looked up at Ryan and spoke in the same steady voice he had used since arriving. "Officer Walker, everyone receives opportunities they do not recognize at first." Ryan blinked. He had never introduced himself. "How do you know my name?" Marcus asked no questions and offered no explanation. He simply looked toward the American flag above the entrance as it moved gently in the breeze. For the first time that morning, a small feeling of uncertainty appeared behind Ryan's confident expression, and although he could not explain why, he suddenly felt as though he had stepped into a situation far bigger than he understood. Ryan tried to dismiss the uneasy feeling, but Marcus's question lingered in his mind. He straightened his posture and convinced himself there had to be a simple explanation. Maybe someone inside had mentioned his name. Maybe Marcus had overheard another officer speaking. Whatever the reason, Ryan refused to let a stranger shake his confidence. "My name is on my uniform," he said, forcing a smile. Marcus looked at him for a moment before nodding politely. "Of course." Yet something about the answer felt intentional, as though Marcus had chosen not to point out the obvious truth. Ryan's name badge was partially covered by a folded jacket hanging from his shoulder. Emily noticed it too. Her anxiety deepened. She wanted to step forward and explain everything, but each passing minute made the situation more complicated. Through the glass doors, she watched senior staff members moving quickly through the lobby. Phones rang. Radios crackled. The department-wide meeting was drawing closer. Meanwhile, outside, the stranger everyone should have been greeting remained seated alone on a bench. A black SUV turned into the parking lot and stopped near the side entrance. Two men in business attire stepped out carrying folders. Ryan recognized one of them as Deputy Director Alan Foster from City Administration. Immediately, Ryan adjusted his uniform and prepared to greet them. As the officials walked toward the building, Marcus quietly observed. The two men glanced in his direction. For the briefest moment, recognition flashed across their faces. One of them even appeared ready to change direction and approach him. But Marcus gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. The gesture lasted less than a second. Both men understood. Without stopping, they continued toward the entrance. Ryan never noticed. Emily did. Her eyes widened. Marcus was not simply remaining calm. He was actively choosing to remain anonymous. That realization changed everything. He was testing something. Or perhaps observing something. Ryan, completely unaware, continued talking. "You picked an interesting day to show up here," he said. "Everybody is nervous about the new director." Marcus folded his hands and looked toward the headquarters building. "Do you think they should be?" Ryan laughed. "Depends who you ask. Some people around here are worried things might change." "And what about you?" Marcus asked. Ryan shrugged. "I am not worried. People talk about reforms every year. Then nothing happens. The same people stay in charge. The same rules apply." Marcus listened carefully. "That sounds like certainty." "It is experience," Ryan replied confidently. Marcus nodded once more. The breeze carried the distant sound of a church bell striking the hour. Across the parking lot, employees hurried toward the building, checking watches and carrying notebooks. The meeting would begin soon. Suddenly, a maintenance worker pushing a cart slowed. As he passed Marcus, the older man smiled warmly. "Good morning, sir." Marcus returned the smile. "Good morning." The exchange lasted only seconds, but Ryan noticed something different in the worker's tone. Respect. Genuine respect. Not because of rank or status. Because of the way Marcus carried himself. Ryan looked away, annoyed by a feeling he could not explain. Then Marcus stood from the bench, adjusted his suit jacket, and looked directly at him. "Officer Walker," he said calmly, "everyone receives a chance to show who they really are. Some people do not realize when that moment arrives." The words landed heavily despite their gentle delivery. Before Ryan could respond, the loudspeaker inside the building announced that all personnel should report immediately to the main auditorium. The moment everyone had been waiting for had finally arrived. The stream of employees moving toward the auditorium grew thicker with every passing minute. Conversations echoed through the lobby as officers, supervisors, and civilian staff members took their seats for the most anticipated meeting the department had held in years. Yet while everyone focused on the future, Marcus seemed interested in the present. He entered the building quietly, blending into the crowd without drawing attention to himself. Ryan walked several steps ahead, still convinced he was dealing with an ordinary visitor who had somehow wandered into an important day. Emily followed behind, her nerves growing stronger with each step. She knew the truth could not stay hidden much longer. Inside the headquarters, polished floors reflected the bright overhead lights. Framed photographs of former chiefs lined the hallways. Commendations, awards, and department milestones decorated the walls. To most employees, they were symbols of pride. To Marcus, they were pieces of a larger story. He slowed occasionally to study them. Not because he was impressed, but because he understood that every institution revealed itself through the things it chose to celebrate. As they approached the main corridor leading to the auditorium, Ryan stopped beside a group of fellow officers. "You heading to the meeting?" one of them asked. "Looks like everybody else is," Ryan replied. The officers laughed. One of them noticed Marcus standing nearby. "Who is that?" he asked quietly. Ryan shrugged. "Just some guy waiting for authorization." The group exchanged knowing smiles before continuing toward the auditorium. Marcus heard every word. His expression never changed. That calmness unsettled Emily more than any argument would have. Most people would have corrected the misunderstanding. Most people would have demanded respect. Marcus simply observed. It was as if he were collecting pieces of a puzzle nobody else knew existed. They eventually reached the auditorium entrance. Hundreds of seats stretched across the room beneath bright stage lighting. Officers filled the rows while department leaders gathered near the front. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Ryan glanced around proudly. "This is where decisions get made," he said. Marcus looked toward the stage. "Is it?" The question sounded simple, yet Ryan found himself unable to answer immediately. Before he could respond, Deputy Director Alan Foster appeared near the entrance. His eyes landed on Marcus for a brief second. Again, recognition flashed across his face. Again, Marcus offered the slightest signal asking him to remain silent. Alan hesitated but complied. Ryan completely missed the exchange. Emily did not. Her heart pounded faster. Whatever Marcus was doing, it was deliberate. He was giving people every opportunity to reveal themselves before revealing who he truly was. The auditorium lights dimmed slightly as staff members hurried to their seats. A low murmur spread through the crowd. The new director was expected to arrive at any moment. Ryan checked his watch and smiled confidently. "Looks like we are finally about to meet the man running this place." Marcus looked toward the stage one more time. Then he turned to Ryan and spoke in the same calm voice that had never once risen above a conversation. Sometimes the most important introductions happen after people have already shown who they are. The room gradually settled into silence as the final employees found their seats. The anticipation that had filled the building all morning now concentrated inside the auditorium. Hundreds of eyes focused on the stage. Some people sat upright with curiosity. Others appeared nervous. A few looked bored, convinced they already knew how the day would unfold. Ryan leaned back in his chair with the confidence of someone who believed he understood the system better than anyone else. Marcus sat several rows behind him, unnoticed by most of the room. The stage lights reflected softly across the polished wooden podium at the center of the platform. Department banners stood motionless on either side. The atmosphere felt formal, almost ceremonial. Then the side door opened. City officials entered first. Deputy Director Alan Foster took his place near the podium. Behind him came members of the mayor's administrative team. The low murmur that had lingered throughout the room finally disappeared. This was it. The moment everyone had been waiting for. Alan adjusted the microphone and smiled. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here." His voice echoed clearly through the auditorium. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for this department. Ryan folded his arms and listened. Around him, officers exchanged quiet glances. Alan continued speaking about public trust, accountability, leadership, and the future. Marcus listened carefully, though his expression remained unchanged. He seemed less interested in the speech itself than in the reaction surrounding him. Every face told a story. Every expression revealed expectations, concerns, or hidden confidence. Then Alan paused. The individual selected for this position has spent more than 20 years rebuilding departments, restoring public confidence, and creating lasting change. A photograph appeared on the large screen behind the stage. The image showed a city skyline from another state. Several employees nodded in recognition. Stories about the incoming director had circulated for weeks. Ryan smirked. "Let us see if he lives up to the reputation," he whispered to the officer sitting beside him. The officer chuckled quietly. Alan looked toward the audience. "Before I introduce him, there is something important everyone should understand. Leadership is not revealed when people know who is watching. Leadership is revealed when they believe nobody important is paying attention." The statement drew puzzled looks throughout the room. Ryan frowned slightly. Something about those words sounded strangely familiar. Then Alan stepped away from the podium and looked directly toward the center seating section. For a brief moment, the entire auditorium became perfectly still. Even the air seemed frozen. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alan said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, "please join me in welcoming your new police director, Marcus Bennett." The room erupted with applause. People immediately began looking toward the entrances, expecting someone important to walk through the doors. Instead, Marcus calmly rose from his seat among them. The applause faltered. Confusion spread across hundreds of faces. Ryan turned instinctively, following the movement. His smile vanished. His eyes widened. For several seconds he simply stared. The stranger from outside. The man from the bench. The man he had dismissed all morning. Marcus stepped into the aisle and began walking toward the stage with the same quiet confidence he had carried since sunrise. And for the first time that day, Ryan Walker realized he had completely misunderstood who had been standing in front of him all along. The silence that followed felt louder than the applause that had come before it. Hundreds of employees sat frozen as Marcus Bennett continued walking toward the stage. Every step seemed to rewrite the events of the morning. Ryan remained motionless in his seat. His mind replayed every conversation outside the building. Every assumption. Every dismissive remark. Every opportunity he had ignored. Across the auditorium, people exchanged stunned looks. Some officers stared openly. Others lowered their eyes, suddenly realizing they had witnessed something important without understanding it at the time. Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. The secret she had carried all morning was finally out in the open. Marcus climbed the steps to the stage and shook Alan Foster's hand. The room slowly recovered from its shock. Applause resumed. Though this time it sounded different. It carried surprise, uncertainty, and respect all at once. Marcus stepped behind the podium. He did not rush to speak. Instead, he looked across the auditorium. His eyes moved from row to row, taking in the faces before him. The room grew quiet again. "Thank you," he said calmly. His voice was not loud, yet every person in the auditorium seemed to hear it clearly. "This morning has been very informative." The statement caused several people to glance at one another. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. Marcus continued. "I arrived earlier than expected because I wanted to learn something important. Not about reports. Not about statistics. Not about policies." He paused. "I wanted to learn about people." The room remained perfectly still. Buildings tell part of a story. Procedures tell another part. But character reveals the rest. Marcus folded his hands on the podium. Every organization eventually becomes a reflection of the choices made by the people inside it. Several supervisors shifted uneasily in their seats. Marcus was not speaking with anger. He was not accusing anyone. Somehow that made his words even more powerful. "This morning I met employees who treated others with kindness when they expected nothing in return. I met employees who showed professionalism even when nobody was watching. I also witnessed something else." Ryan lowered his eyes. He knew exactly where this was heading. Yet Marcus never mentioned him by name. "I saw how quickly assumptions can replace understanding. How easily appearances can influence judgment." A deep silence settled over the auditorium. Leadership is not about power. It is about responsibility. It is not about deciding who matters. It is about remembering that everyone matters. Marcus looked toward the audience. For a brief moment, his eyes passed directly over Ryan. There was no anger there. No hostility. Only disappointment. Somehow that felt far heavier. The people we serve deserve fairness. They deserve respect. And they deserve a department that lives by those principles every single day. Several employees nodded quietly. Others stared at the stage in thoughtful silence. The atmosphere inside the room had completely changed. This was no longer a routine introduction. It had become a mirror reflecting the culture of the department back at itself. Marcus straightened slightly. "Over the coming weeks, I will be meeting with every division, every supervisor, and every officer. Not because I believe change comes from speeches." He paused once more. Change comes from choices. And in that moment, Ryan Walker realized that the real consequences of the morning were only beginning. When the meeting ended, employees left the auditorium carrying far more than notes and schedules. Conversations filled the hallways. Some people spoke about Marcus Bennett's experience. Others discussed his message. But one topic spread faster than any other. The story of the morning. The stranger outside. The missed opportunity. The assumptions that had quietly unfolded before anyone realized who he was. Ryan Walker heard the whispers everywhere he went. By noon, it felt as though the entire building knew. Yet Marcus never mentioned his name. He never called him out publicly. He never embarrassed him in front of the department. That made the situation even harder to ignore. Throughout the afternoon, Marcus began meeting with division leaders. One by one, supervisors entered the executive conference room overlooking the city. Some arrived confident. Others appeared nervous. Marcus treated each person the same way. He listened. He asked questions. He took notes. More importantly, he paid attention. Not just to answers, but to attitudes. By 3 o'clock, a pattern was beginning to emerge. Several employees independently described communication problems within the department. Others mentioned favoritism. A few quietly expressed concerns about how certain people were treated depending on who they were or where they came from. None of the comments sounded dramatic. Yet taken together, they painted a picture Marcus could not ignore. Meanwhile, Ryan sat alone in a small briefing room reviewing reports he could barely concentrate on. Every few minutes, his thoughts drifted back to the auditorium. Back to the stage. Back to the moment Marcus walked down the aisle while everyone applauded. For the first time in years, Ryan found himself questioning his own judgment. Late that afternoon, an email appeared in his inbox. The sender was the office of the police director. His pulse quickened as he opened it. The message was brief. Director Bennett requested a private meeting at 8 o'clock the following morning. No explanation. No details. Just a time and location. Ryan stared at the screen. Around him, the station continued operating normally. Phones rang. Officers completed reports. Dispatch radios crackled with routine calls. Yet for Ryan, nothing felt normal anymore. The next morning arrived with gray clouds hanging over the city skyline. At precisely 8 o'clock, Ryan stood outside Marcus's office. The door was slightly open. Through the glass wall, he could see Marcus seated at a conference table reviewing documents. There was no sign of anger. No sign of confrontation. Only quiet focus. Ryan knocked softly. "Come in," Marcus said. Ryan stepped inside. The office felt surprisingly simple. No oversized desk. No extravagant decorations. Just books, department reports, and framed photographs of community events. Marcus closed the folder in front of him and gestured toward an empty chair. "Thank you for coming." Ryan sat down carefully. Several seconds passed. The silence seemed intentional. Finally Marcus spoke. "Officer Walker, do you know why I asked to meet with you?" Ryan hesitated. "Because of what happened yesterday." Marcus nodded. "Partly." He folded his hands and looked directly at him. "What interests me more is what happened before yesterday. The habits. The assumptions. The choices." Ryan felt the weight of those words settle across the room. And for the first time since joining the department, he realized this meeting was not about punishment. It was about something far more difficult. It was about accountability. Ryan sat quietly as Marcus's words settled over the room. The office remained silent for several moments. Outside the window, the city moved through another ordinary morning, but inside that office, something important was changing. Ryan had expected anger. He had expected criticism. What he had not expected was honesty. Marcus leaned back slightly in his chair. "When I arrived here, I did not come looking for perfect people," he said. "Perfect people do not exist. I came looking for people willing to grow." Ryan lowered his eyes. The confidence that had once defined him felt distant now. "I made assumptions," he admitted. Marcus nodded. "Yes, you did." There was no hostility in his voice. Only truth. "The question is whether you learn from them." Ryan looked across the table. "Why did you not expose me in front of everyone?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled faintly. "Because public humiliation teaches very little. Accountability teaches much more." The answer stayed with Ryan. In all his years at the department, he had rarely heard leadership described that way. Marcus opened a folder and slid a document across the table. It was not a disciplinary notice. It was not a suspension. It was a leadership development plan. Ryan looked at it in surprise. "You are giving me another chance." Marcus folded his hands. "I am giving you an opportunity. What you do with it is your choice." For the first time, Ryan understood the lesson Marcus had been teaching since the moment they met. Leadership was not about authority. It was about character. Over the following months, changes began spreading throughout the department. Training programs were expanded. Community partnerships grew stronger. Employees were encouraged to speak openly about concerns without fear of being ignored. Marcus met with officers at every level, learning their stories and listening to their experiences. Slowly, trust began replacing frustration. Respect began replacing assumptions. Ryan changed as well. Not overnight. Real growth rarely happens that way. But meeting after meeting, conversation after conversation, he began seeing people differently. He started asking questions instead of making judgments. He started listening instead of assuming. Colleagues noticed the difference. So did the community. One afternoon nearly a year later, Ryan found himself standing near the same entrance where everything had begun. Employees moved through the doors carrying coffee cups and morning reports. The scene looked familiar, yet everything felt different. Marcus walked outside and joined him. For a moment neither man spoke. Then Ryan smiled. "You know, I still think about that first day." Marcus laughed softly. "So do I." Ryan shook his head. "I thought I knew exactly who you were." Marcus looked toward the city skyline glowing beneath the afternoon sun. "Most people do not get into trouble because they lack information," he said. "They get into trouble because they stop being curious." Ryan nodded. He understood now. The lesson had never been about rank, position, or titles. It had been about something much deeper. As the American flag above headquarters moved gently in the breeze, Marcus looked back toward the building and smiled. The department still had challenges ahead. Every organization does. But it was moving in the right direction. And sometimes that is where justice begins. One choice. One lesson. One opportunity to become better than the person you were yesterday. Because a badge may grant authority, but character is what earns respect.